I was home working on my bike when I heard loud banging. Then came the sound of splintering when his HOA goons smashed through my front door screaming, "You're in violation. Big mistake." They had no idea who they were messing with or what was about to roll into their clubhouse. 30 bikers with military experience were about to teach them what real authority looks like. After retiring from 25 years as a Marine Corps mechanic, I moved into Oakwood Estates seeking peace and quiet. I'd served 3 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, and all I wanted was a garage where I could work on my bikes and a porch where I could watch the sunset with a cold beer. The neighborhood seemed perfect, good location, reasonable prices, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. The HOA fees were steep at $450 monthly, but they promised road maintenance and community security. What they didn't mention was the iron grip they'd try to keep on every aspect of my property. My name's Jack Harmon, and for my entire adult life, I've lived by a code. Respect is earned, not demanded. Whether in the Corps or with my motorcycle club, the Iron Veterans, I've always believed in standing your ground when you're in the right. For 3 years, things were relatively peaceful. I kept my restored Harley in the garage, maintained my lawn, and even participated in community events. The previous HOA president, an older gentleman named Richard, was reasonable and understood the meaning of property rights. Then everything changed when Marcus Donnelly, a former corporate security executive with political ambitions, became HOA president. The day after the election, new community standards appeared in everyone's mailbox, 32 pages of rules about everything from mailbox height to what color Christmas lights were acceptable. Marcus strutted around the neighborhood like he was running a military operation instead of a suburban community. He hired a security team of 4 men who patrolled in SUVs with magnetic HOA logos slapped on the doors. They'd stop and photograph anything they deemed a violation, from children's toys left in driveways to improper grass height. Most neighbors just complied to avoid trouble. I should have seen the warning signs when Richard, the former president, suddenly sold his house and moved away 3 weeks after Marcus took over. "This isn't the community I helped build," he told me the day he left. "Watch yourself, Jack. Marcus doesn't like people who don't fall in line." It started with minor complaints. My garbage cans visible from the street for too long, some oil stains on my driveway from working on my bike, and the American flag I'd hung in my garage. Marcus claimed it was non-regulation and diminished neighborhood aesthetic. As a veteran who'd seen friends die under that flag, I wasn't about to take it down because some power-tripping HOA president decided it wasn't decorative enough. The letters escalated to fines, $75 at first, then $150, then $300. Each one threatening legal action if I didn't comply. I ignored them all, knowing they couldn't legally enter my property without permission. At the quarterly HOA meeting, I confronted Marcus about the harassment. "That flag stayed up while I was getting shot at overseas," I told him. "It's not coming down because you think it clashes with your color scheme." Marcus just smiled that corporate smile. "Rules are rules, Mr. Harmon. No one is above them, not even veterans." The way he said veterans made my blood boil, like it was some kind of hobby I needed to get over. After the meeting, an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, approached me in the parking lot. "They're doing the same to me," she whispered. "My late husband was in Vietnam. They're saying the memorial garden I planted for him violates the landscaping code." That was the first hint that I wasn't being singled out. This was a pattern. Other neighbors started reaching out quietly. The Ramirez family was being fined for their children's basketball hoop. Sarah Johnson, a single mother who worked night shifts as an ER nurse, had received violations for having her porch light on outside approved hours. Hours she needed that light for safety when returning from work. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every alleged violation, every encounter. I'd learned in the Marines that when facing an enemy, intelligence is your best weapon. Marcus must have noticed. The next day, a formal letter arrived threatening legal action if I didn't immediately comply with all previously noted violations. It also included a new violation, unauthorized surveillance equipment, referring to the security camera I'd installed on my own porch. That weekend, my buddy Mike from the Iron Veterans came over to help me change the oil in my Harley. Within an hour, one of Marcus's security goons was photographing us from the street. When Mike approached him to ask what he was doing, the man claimed he was documenting a noise violation. "We haven't even started the bike yet," Mike pointed out. The security guy just smirked. "We've had complaints." That night, another violation notice appeared on my door. $500 for unauthorized mechanical work and noise disturbance. It was dated 2 hours before Mike had even arrived. Within days, I noticed a car parked across from my house. 2 men in that same vehicle would drive by my property at odd hours. Once, when I approached them, they claimed to be security consultants for the HOA, documenting violations. I installed additional security cameras around my property, a skill I'd picked up in the Corps. That weekend, I had my riding club over for our monthly barbecue. Nothing wild, just a dozen veterans sharing stories and enjoying some ribs. The next morning, there was a notice on my door claiming unauthorized gathering and noise violations with a $500 fine. The camera footage showed Marcus himself placing the notice at 5:30 a.m., then taking photos of the motorcycles in my driveway. The violation included timestamps from 9 p.m., a full hour before any of my friends had even arrived. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board about the false reporting. 3 days later, I received a letter stating my complaint was reviewed and dismissed, with an additional $250 administrative processing fee. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. This was personal. The surveillance intensified. An SUV with tinted windows would park at the end of my street for hours. My neighbors reported being questioned about me, my comings and goings, who visited me, what I did for work. Marcus approached me one day as I was checking my mail. "You know, Harmon, life could be much easier if you just played by the rules like everyone else." "I'm not breaking any rules," I replied. "And harassment isn't in the HOA bylaws. You military types are all the same," he sneered. "Think the rules don't apply to you. Well, in my community, everyone follows the rules, or they face the consequences." "It's not your community," I reminded him. "It belongs to all the homeowners." He laughed as he walked away. "We'll see about that." That night, the security cameras caught 2 of Marcus's men placing something under my mailbox. When I checked the next morning, I found a small electronic device, a GPS tracker. They weren't just watching my house. They were trying to track my movements. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was in my garage working on my vintage Harley when I heard the pounding on my front door. Not a knock, a pounding, like someone was trying to break it down.
Hoa inspetin.
"Open up, Harmon," a voice shouted. Before I could even get halfway across my living room, I heard the splintering of wood. My solid oak door frame cracked as 2 men in tactical vests with HOA printed on them forced their way in. Marcus and his head of security, a former mall cop named Trevor, stood in my entryway like they owned the place. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, trying to keep my combat instincts in check. "Conducting an emergency inspection," Marcus announced, waving a piece of paper. "Section 24B of the HOA bylaws." "You just broke my door?" I said, pointing to the splintered frame and damaged lock. "Necessary entry after repeated non-compliance," Trevor stated, hand resting on what looked like a taser on his belt. "We have authority to inspect for violations." I stood my ground. "Get out of my house. Now." "After our inspection," Marcus insisted, pushing past me toward my garage. "We've had reports of hazardous materials, unauthorized structures, and multiple aesthetic violations." I followed them as they marched into my garage, where they immediately began photographing everything: my tools, my motorcycle parts, and especially my American flag on the wall. "Non-regulation display," Marcus noted, typing something into his tablet. $750 fine. "That flag flew over my unit's barracks in Fallujah," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You don't touch it." Trevor smirked and reached for the flag anyway, pulling it down from the wall. "Needs to be removed or properly displayed according to Section 18D of Community Standards." When he carelessly tossed my flag onto my workbench, something snapped inside me. I stepped forward, but Marcus got between us. I wouldn't, he warned. Trevor here is licensed security. Interfering with an HOA inspection could result in additional penalties or even police involvement. They continued their inspection, placing violation notices on nearly everything in my garage. Then they moved into my living room, where Trevor accidentally knocked over a framed photo of my old unit. The glass shattered across the floor. "You'll be billed for the cleanup," Marcus noted casually. I picked up the photo, careful of the broken glass. 20 faces smiled back at me. 8 of them never came home. "Here's your bill," Marcus said, handing me a document showing $4,500 in accumulated fines and inspection fees. "You have 72 hours to pay, or we'll place a lien on your property." As they walked out through my damaged door, Trevor turned back. "Rules are rules, tough guy." They had no idea what they'd just started. The moment they left, I pulled out my phone and called Mike, our club president and a former JAG attorney. "Mike, I need the brothers. Now, those HOA bastards just broke into my house." "What? Are you serious?" His voice went from concern to cold. "I'm on my way." While I waited, I documented everything. The broken door, the scattered glass, the violation notices, my flag tossed carelessly on the workbench. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from rage I was fighting to control. Within an hour, 5 iron veterans had arrived at my house, with Mike at the lead. When they saw my door, their expressions darkened. "They just forced their way in?" Rodriguez, a former Marine MP, examined the splintered frame. "Like they owned the place," I confirmed. "Said they had HOA authority under some bylaw section." Mike was already reviewing the so-called inspection document they'd left. "This is complete bullshit. Section 24B only authorizes exterior inspections with 48-hour written notice. There's nothing in the bylaws that allows forced entry. Ever. So this is breaking and entering," Rodriguez stated flatly. "And criminal trespassing, property damage, falsification of documents, and probably half a dozen other charges," Mike confirmed, taking photos of the damage. Dawson, our road captain and former SWAT officer, was checking my security cameras. "Got the whole thing on video, Jack. Clear as day. These idiots just committed a felony." I explained about the growing harassment, the false violations, the targeting of other vulnerable residents. "This isn't just about you anymore. Wilson, our oldest member at 72, who'd served in Vietnam, said quietly, 'If they're doing this to you, a combat veteran who can stand up for himself, imagine what they're doing to the elderly or single parents in the neighborhood.' He was right. This had started as my problem, but it had become something bigger. "We need to gather intelligence," Rodriguez suggested, falling back on his military training. "Document everything, identify patterns, find other victims, and locate their vulnerabilities. And we need to understand their legal standing," added Mike. "I'll review the HOA bylaws, state laws on homeowner rights, and local ordinances. These guys are way outside the law." We spent the next few hours developing a plan. Mike would handle legal research. Rodriguez and Dawson would help me document everything and set up more secure surveillance. Wilson, who everyone in the community loved, would quietly talk to other homeowners to find more victims. "But first," Dawson said, examining my door, "let's get this fixed so you're secure tonight." While Dawson and Rodriguez worked on repairing my door, Mike made calls to his contacts at the county clerk's office for official HOA documents. Wilson sat with me at my kitchen table, his weathered hand on my shoulder. "You know, in Nam we had a saying," he said quietly. "The enemy gets a vote, but they don't get the last word." By evening, my door was temporarily repaired. I had copies of the real HOA bylaws in hand, and we'd established a secure communication channel for coordinating with other homeowners. As the meeting concluded, we stood in a circle, hands in the center like we used to do before missions. "For the community," Mike said. "For the community," we echoed. As my brothers rolled out that night, headlights cutting through the darkness, I felt something I hadn't felt since my service days. The unshakable confidence that comes from having your brothers at your back. Over the next week, Our club became an investigative unit. Mike pulled copies of the actual HOA bylaws from county records, not the revised version Marcus had been distributing. Rodriguez and Dawson, with their law enforcement backgrounds, documented the damage to my property and filed police reports for breaking and entering. We created a secure email address and discreetly shared it with other homeowners, asking for accounts of similar experiences. The responses flooded in immediately. Mrs. Henderson, an 83-year-old widow, had been fined $2,300 for unapproved garden ornaments, a memorial to her late husband who died in Vietnam. When she couldn't pay, they'd sent landscapers who destroyed the garden while she was at a doctor's appointment. I came home and all his roses were gone, she told us, tears in her eyes. 40 years I tended those roses with him. They said it was an aesthetic violation. The Ramirez family faced $6,700 in fines for their children's basketball hoop and ethnic decorations that were actually American flags for their son's Eagle Scout project. Marcus had threatened to report Mr. Ramirez's food truck business to health inspectors if they didn't pay. Sarah Johnson, a single mother and ER nurse, found security searching her garage while her 12-year-old daughter was home alone. They claimed to be checking for unauthorized occupancy. My daughter was terrified, Sarah told us. She locked herself in the bathroom and called me at work. By the time I got home, they were gone, but they'd left violations totaling $1,200. Each victim had the same story: intimidation, unauthorized entry, and threats of liens or foreclosure if they didn't pay. Marcus wasn't just power tripping. He was systematically targeting those he thought wouldn't fight back. We compiled all the evidence: photographs, video testimony, copies of violation notices, bank records of payments. The pattern was clear. Marcus and his team were running an intimidation racket under the guise of HOA enforcement. This is organized corruption, Mike said as we reviewed everything. They're targeting people who can't fight back or don't know their rights. What I don't understand is why, I said. Is it just about power? Or is there more to it? Rodriguez, always the investigator, had been digging deeper. Follow the money, he suggested. Where are all these fines going? Mike nodded. That's our next step. As a homeowner, I have a right to see the HOA financial records. Getting access to those records wasn't easy. The HOA secretary initially claimed they were being audited and unavailable. Mike had to file a formal request citing state laws that required financial transparency for homeowners associations. After 3 days and the threat of legal action, they finally granted him access to the records. Mike spent an entire day reviewing years of financial documents, taking photographs of every page with his phone. What he found exceeded our worst suspicions. In the last 8 months, they've collected over $87,000 in fines, Mike reported. Less than $9,000 has gone to actual community maintenance. Where's the rest? I asked. Consulting fees, Mike explained, showing us the records. Paid to companies with names like Donnelly Security Consulting, MDG Community Management, Tactical Assessment Group, all registered in the last year, all with the same registered agent, Marcus's brother-in-law. Shell companies, Rodriguez concluded. Classic money laundering setup. We kept digging and discovered something even more alarming. Marcus had filed to run for city council, using his successful community management experience as his platform. He's using the HOA as a stepping stone to political office, Dawson realized. And a personal ATM in the meantime. Wilson had been talking to more residents and discovered another disturbing pattern. 3 properties had been foreclosed on since Marcus took over, all for unpaid HOA fines and fees. All 3 were purchased at auction by the same shell companies receiving the consulting fees. The picture became clear. This wasn't just about rule enforcement or even simple theft. Marcus was systematically targeting vulnerable homeowners, driving them into financial distress, then acquiring their properties through his shell companies when they couldn't pay. This is organized fraud, Mike said gravely, and we're going to shut it down. While gathering evidence, we made another shocking discovery. Trevor, the head of security, had a criminal record for impersonating a police officer in another state. He'd been fired from 3 security jobs for excessive force. He's not even licensed to carry that taser he had on his belt, Rodriguez confirmed after running a background check through his law enforcement contacts. And those tactical vests they wear? Illegal if they're representing themselves as any kind of authority. We also learned that Marcus's security team had been entering homes without permission throughout the neighborhood. They used various tactics, claiming emergency inspections, waiting until residents were away, or simply intimidating elderly homeowners into letting them in. They're methodical, Dawson observed. They target homes when they're most vulnerable, when single parents are at work, when elderly residents have medical appointments, when families are on vacation. Mike had continued digging into the financial records and uncovered a disturbing timeline. "Look at this," he said, showing us a spreadsheet he'd created. "First, they issue minor violations with small fines. If you pay those, they leave you alone for a while. If you don't, they escalate to bigger violations with larger fines. Creating a record of non-compliance." Rodriguez nodded, understanding the strategy. "Exactly," Mike continued. "Then they use that record to justify emergency inspections where they find even more violations. The fines snowball until people either pay up or face foreclosure." Wilson, who'd been talking to more elderly residents, discovered another tactic. They're offering fine forgiveness if residents sell their homes to specific, approved buyers at below-market rates. "Let me guess," I said. "The approved buyers are Marcus's shell companies." Wilson nodded grimly. "Got it in one." Mrs. Peterson on Maple Street was pressured to sell her home for $50,000 below market value to avoid $8,000 in HOA fines she couldn't pay. The buyer was Donnelly Investment Group. The scope of the scheme was breathtaking. Marcus wasn't just enriching himself with fines. He was systematically acquiring properties in the neighborhood at discounted prices through intimidation and fraud. "And the political angle makes it worse," Mike added. "Once he's on the city council, he'll have influence over zoning, property values, development contracts." "We need to stop this now," I said, the urgency clear to everyone, "before more people lose their homes." We had gathered enough evidence for legal action, but we knew that Marcus's political connections might delay any official response. Meanwhile, vulnerable residents would continue to suffer. "The monthly HOA meeting is this Saturday," Rodriguez noted. "Everyone will be there, including Marcus and his security team," I added. Mike looked thoughtful. "What if we all showed up? Not just us, but everyone who's been victimized." "A show of force?" Dawson asked. "A show of community," Mike corrected. "We're not going there to intimidate. We're going there to expose the truth publicly, where it can't be buried or delayed." With evidence in hand, we developed a two-pronged approach. First, Mike filed emergency legal motions against the HOA for multiple violations of state law and civil rights. Second, we organized a very special visit to the monthly HOA meeting at their clubhouse. The legal documents were a masterpiece, 42 pages detailing every illegal entry, every fraudulent fine, and every misappropriated dollar, with sworn statements from 12 homeowners and documented evidence. But we knew legal action alone wouldn't be enough. Marcus had connections in the local government that could delay proceedings for months, while more homeowners suffered. "We need to make this so public that it can't be swept under the rug," Mike explained as we finalized our plan. "When everyone knows what's happening, his political connections won't be able to protect him." We spent the next 2 days preparing. Jenkins and Wilson continued gathering testimonies. Rodriguez and Dawson compiled all the evidence into a presentation. Mike prepared legal documents for each affected homeowner, informing them of their rights. The most challenging part was convincing the victims to stand up publicly. Many were afraid of retaliation. "What if they increase our fines?" Mrs. Henderson asked fearfully when we approached her. "They can't," Mike assured her, showing her the legal documents. "Once these papers are filed, any attempt at retaliation becomes additional evidence of harassment. Plus," he added with a smile, "you'll have us standing beside you." Gradually, the fear gave way to determination. People who had been suffering in silence realized they weren't alone. By Friday evening, we had commitments from 15 families to attend the meeting and share their stories. I reached out to every Iron veteran in our chapter, explaining the situation. The response was unanimous. They would all be there. "This isn't just about your neighborhood anymore, Jack," our chapter president told me. "This is about standing up for what's right." Every one of us took an oath to protect against enemies foreign and domestic. These crooks might not be foreign, but they're sure as hell enemies of their own community. Saturday morning arrived clear and crisp. The plan was set. Mike had filed the legal papers the previous afternoon, ensuring that Marcus would have been served notice just hours before the meeting. At 9:30 a.m., 27 motorcycles rumbled into Oakwood Estates. Each rider wore their Iron Veterans cut proudly, American flags flying from several bikes. We weren't there to intimidate, we were there to educate. As we parked in the Clubhouse lot, I saw Marcus through the window. His face went pale as bike after bike arrived. His security team suddenly looked a lot less confident when faced with men who had actually served and protected. The Clubhouse fell silent as we entered. Marcus attempted to call the meeting to order, his voice cracking slightly. "This is a closed homeowners meeting. If you don't live in Oakwood Estates, you'll need to leave." Mike stepped forward with documentation. "Actually, each of these gentlemen is here as a guest of a homeowner, which is permitted under Article 3, Section 2 of the bylaws. The same bylaws you've been ignoring." Marcus looked trapped. The room was packed. Nearly every homeowner in the community had shown up, along with my brothers from the Iron Veterans. His security team, usually so confident when intimidating elderly residents, suddenly looked small. I stood up and addressed the packed room. "My name is Jack Harmon. I served this country for 25 years as a Marine. Many of you know me as the guy with the motorcycles. What you might not know is that our HOA leadership has been systematically violating our rights as homeowners." There were murmurs throughout the room. I continued. "Just last week, Marcus Donnelly and his security team illegally broke down my door and entered my home without permission. They damaged my property, violated my privacy, and threatened me with financial penalties. I projected the security footage of my broken door and their forced entry onto the wall." The gasps in the room were audible. Marcus interrupted. "We had authorization under the bylaws for emergency inspections." "No, you didn't," Mike countered, holding up the official bylaws. "Section 24B, which you've cited, only permits exterior inspections with 48-hour written notice. There is no provision for entering homes without owner permission." I presented the evidence, security footage of my broken door, photographs of the damage, and the violation notices left throughout my home. "But this isn't just about me," I continued. "This is about all of us." One by one, the victims shared their stories. Mrs. Henderson stood up shakily and described how afraid she'd been when they entered her home and destroyed her memorial garden. "I'm 83 years old," she said, her voice trembling. "My Harold served in Vietnam. Those roses were all I had left of him, and they tore them out because they weren't the right color for the neighborhood." Sarah Johnson, still in her hospital scrubs from her night shift, recounted how her daughter had been terrified by strange men searching their garage. "My daughter had nightmares for weeks. She's afraid to be home alone now, which means I've had to cut my shifts at the hospital. We're barely making ends meet, and now they want $1,200 for violations I never committed." Mr. Ramirez explained the threats against his business. "They said if I didn't pay $6,700 for my son's basketball hoop, they would report my food truck to health inspectors. My business is my family's livelihood." One by one, victims shared their stories, and with each account, more homeowners joined our side. The room's mood shifted from shocked silence to outrage. Marcus attempted damage control, claiming these were isolated incidents and misunderstandings. That's when Mike projected the financial records on the wall. $87,000 in fines collected in 8 months. Less than $9,000 spent on community improvements. "Where's the rest, Marcus?" Then he showed the property records. 3 foreclosed homes, all purchased by shell companies owned by Marcus's brother-in-law. The same shell companies receiving consulting fees from our HOA funds. The room erupted. Homeowners who had been silently enduring their own harassment finally found their voices. The meeting ended with an emergency motion from the homeowners. Immediate suspension of Marcus and his security team pending investigation, and the establishment of a homeowner oversight committee for all HOA activities. Over the following days, the consequences of our showdown unfolded rapidly. Marcus resigned as HOA president 3 days later, hoping to avoid the criminal charges that were now pending from the district attorney's office, who had opened an investigation based on our evidence. Trevor was arrested on outstanding warrants from another state. The security team disbanded overnight. A week after the confrontation, the HOA elected a new board with transparency rules and homeowner rights protections. Mrs. Henderson's garden was replanted by volunteers. The community came together like never before. As for my flag, it flies proudly not just in my garage, but on new flagpoles throughout the neighborhood. A reminder that sometimes standing your ground isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everyone who can't stand up alone. When they smashed my door screaming, "You're in violation," they never expected to find a brotherhood that would remind them what real American values look like.